Are you ready for a second line day? We have got gate 59 in the second line and it's called Shyness. So the first line, they know that they can break down barriers. They know themselves very well. They are introspective, they are investigative, they understand themselves. Like all foundations, really, they're all introspective. So it recognizes that within it is the power to penetrate auras and break down barriers. When you get to the second line, you get to the projection. They don't know that they can break down barriers. They're just hanging out. They're just doing what they do. And the fact that they can break down barriers is what they're projecting out. But they don't know it for themselves. So there's no sort of movement from them in that sense. And this is what we call shyness. It's not really shyness, but that's what we call it. And there's a lifetime learning here which says self-imposed barriers. This is a genetic barrier. It's not being self-imposed from a mental place. They're not supposed to be putting themselves out there, so to speak. They have to wait to be called out. And this can make them seem shy, retiring. So it gives them that allure. I've been using this word a lot in gate 4059, allure. You have to say it like that. It's actually allure, probably, but allure. The second gate has this, the second line has this sort of this feeling that they don't know what's going on. So they're just involved in that process. They don't actually even know that they have a sexual strategy. By being in their own space and away from everything else, that because that they're doing that, their space is then being conditioned by the gate of intimacy. It's just how it is. They're there, they're hanging out, they're on their own. They can't escape the fact that we're in gate 59, line 2. And so that is going to condition them. And everybody then is going to think that they have a problem with being intimate because they're just staying in their house and they're just hanging out and I'm fine. No. So that also is part of the projection that comes in on the second line. People look through the window and they'll see that they're all on their own and they say, oh, look, they're so shy. Let's go and call them out and invite them to the dance. So shyness in this context played out through this gate. It's not a problem. It's a strategy. It's a bonding strategy that is imposed, you could say, by the program. It's not a mental position to be, I'm not doing shy, I'm just being shy. In the exaltation, a preferred and natural separateness that protects against inevitable instability that's engendered by union. The restriction of the sex drive to maintain separateness. Second lines are always kind of getting found out. The moment they project outwards, somebody else picks up on that projection and then they come after them with their boldness, and that might turn into a rather uncomfortable situation. After all, it's not necessarily something that's guaranteed to work. It may not. Whether it does or not is part of the process. So here in this line of shyness, boldness, the restriction of the sex drive to maintain separateness is a way of keeping oneself back so that you don't have to deal with what happens. The lower trigram is not equipped to deal with the other side. So, they are just in their own process. They're just in their own room doing their own thing. And yet the channel that this is part of is all about intimacy. The gate itself, all about sexuality. So there's always an aspect within them that is very uncomfortable because something keeps knocking on their door or knocking on their window, calling them out. They have to deal with that power from the other side, but they don't exactly know what it is and they're not really equipped for it. The other side, in this sense, is gate 6. It brings the emotional wave. It brings passion, it brings desire, it brings the up and down of that powerful motor. And this can be quite a thing to deal with. So just because that shy second line is being called out to intimacy, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Everyone who carries the second line, they always have that thing about being called out. but it's called by different forces. Some of the calls will lead you to a path of disturbance, and some of the calls will lead you to a path of relative peacefulness, success, whatever the polarity happens to be. What's important is how you enter into any situation, any intimacy, any union. And it always comes back to the same thing. If you are not living out your definition, your type, your authority, then you cannot properly live out any of the lines that are part of your design. If you're a first line, you keep on banging people over the head and it doesn't work. And if you're a second line, people keep calling you out and it doesn't necessarily work, because each time it happens, you think, oh, that's the answer, and it's not the answer, and you end up getting really hurt. But just because they call you out and say, hey, come to the dance, it doesn't mean that you have to say yes. I know this is a generator gate, but this is a lesson for every projector that we have to learn, is that just because an invitation comes, it doesn't mean you've got to respond hell yes to it. What does your strategy and authority say? We're not in the gate of saying yes to, not that the gate of saying yes should say yes to everything, but we're not in the gate of yes anymore. We've left that behind a couple of days ago now. This is entering into an experience correctly according to your design. And then your response is going to be correct, which doesn't mean it will be successful or satisfying or peaceful according to your mind. Might be a surprise, might be a disappointment, but it just depends. Whatever comes at you is going to be correct for you if you have entered into it correctly as yourself. The detriment, a calculated shyness rooted in deep psychological barriers and even in dynamic individuals will always restrict interactions. Infertility rooted psychologically or biologically that conditions the drive for separateness. The difficulty that comes into the life of any second line is that they're not in control of who calls them out. They're not in control of who's going to recognize them. All second lines are going to have difficulty in their process because there's no way in which they can condition who calls them. They just have to be very clear within themselves about whether they can answer the call or not. Most beings on this planet are living out of the not self. And so that answering of a call is never clear, and it's never according to strategy and authority. Not for the majority of beings on this planet. And of course, that leads to difficulties. It leads to conflict. It doesn't mean that somebody with the 59-2 in the detriment cannot have and give birth to a healthy human being. That's not what it is saying here. But for the vast majority of humanity, as they are expressing in the world at the moment, it is true. And there's no question about that. It's the people who do not want to be disturbed. They don't want to be called out. They don't want to be fertile. They're in their own space. They don't even know that fertility is a question. And then they're called out. And they remember about fertility maybe. And it's not just about biological fertility, remember, it's also many other things. Being called out into intimacy, to give birth to something new out of that shared intimacy. It could be work, it could be pleasure, it could be anything in between. So many people get very kind of focused on the nature of the detriment. I get very concerned about it. But these descriptions are for the not self. The Ravi Ching was written for the not self. There are signposts to potential resistance. It's not a manual for how to live in this world. So when you're living out of your own nature, there is no exaltation, there is no detriment. It's simply you. Properly integrated into your totality. And each one, each thing, each exaltation and detriment becomes a necessary aspect of what it is to be you, perfectly expressed through your correctness, through your unique correctness. 59-2s have no sexual problem around shyness. This is an assumption that people make. It's their genetic strategy to be called out. And only when they're called out and only when they answer the call according to their design can they be fertile. Only then. And of course, that's very rare. And what it means in this context is that it's the correctness of the result. Yes, there might be a result of fertility. There might be some, I don't know, it could be a child, it could be a project that comes out. But if the union is not correct, then, and it's not that anything bad necessarily will happen. It's not that any of these things lead to death and disaster and apocalypse, but it's just not the correct experience. That's all. And not a moral judgment. It's just not the experience that you're here to have, not the one that is going to benefit you as you are in your unique configuration on this planet. So it's not really, I mean, this whole gate becomes very much a focus for good, bad, and appropriate and inappropriate behavior and all the stuff that we get very in our heads about over sexuality and the bonding process and the way that we express ourselves in this respect. And that's really not helpful, I suppose you could say, at the end of the day, because it's just what it is. It's expressing as it is. So what's happening right now? What happens if we don't label this good or bad? What happens if we don't label this exaltation or detriment? It's just an experience. How does that feel? Yeah. If you meet someone or you are someone with 59-2 in the detriment, what that is basically saying is that there just aren't many people who are your genetic match, because it can be quite uncomfortable, to have that genetic role of being the shy one. It's people assume that there is something wrong, that you're a bit standoffish, or that you're, I don't know, something is going on with you, but there's nothing wrong. It's just that there are only a few people that can make that match. And our mind might say, but hey, I want that person over there, or I want this experience over there. And the mind is doing it, saying, oh, but if you bring it back to the body, the genetic imperative, if there's that surrendering to the vehicle, to the fact that we are in a program, what's it like then? Shut the mind down if that's at all possible, depending on your own configuration again. But just, okay, what's beneath that? You've got the chatter up here. What's beneath that? What's the program saying here? What's your body telling you? What is your specific imperative? And if you don't have this gate consistently defined, then you get to experience all of these different roles as the different planets go through them. The sun at the moment, the moon goes through it every month. What's your experience of it? But this 59-2, who's not able to match up to everybody because that's not their experience, they can't initiate union themselves. This isn't a manifestor channel, but a second line can't do that anyway. This is somewhere that infertility could lie in the chart, because there's no movement to do anything in this 59-2. They're not able to break any barriers down themselves. They're not able to just get out and penetrate the auras themselves. If nobody comes and calls them out, then they're just in their room hanging out. Nothing gets broken down. Nothing gets penetrated. It doesn't matter what kind of relationships you have. If you're not having the right ones, if the right boldness isn't coming along to match that second line shyness, then the right genetic mix isn't going to be there. And there can be no true, correct fertility for these people. The 55-2, the grounding, is called distrust. 55th gate is emotionally fickle. It might take some awareness to find the right grounding for shyness in that fickleness, as it's not easy to trust it. Shyness isn't always trusted either. It can be seen as a strategy, which it is, but it can be seen as a mental strategy rather than part of the mechanic. So perhaps the distrust supports the shyness by making sure that you're answering the correct call and not just trusting any call. There are a lot of planetary activations and shenanigans going on today. Venus is moving into gate 6 at 1354 BST, the gate of conflict and the gate of friction, where growth cannot exist without friction. Gate 6 being the generator for all the emotional waves, as we know. So here we find passion and desire and moods and needs and sensitivity and all of that kind of thing, all pushed together. Boundaries being especially important for gate 6 because it controls the pH of the body, keeping what's inside inside and what's outside outside. And of course, the 6 meeting the 59 of the sun. And we have this for the next, I think it's 3 days. Yeah, 3 days. The 59-6. We all get to experience the channel of mating. So if you don't have this consistently in your design, you will have it for the next few days. So this is a design focused on reproduction. This is a great time to get together with people and start new projects and get something new going. Now we've talked so much about this, really, this attractive energy that is so skilled at breaking down barriers, penetrating auras. So you could explore whether over the next few days you find it easier to get closer to people, or if you end up in any kind of unusual situations, whether the opportunity for new projects or new collaborations or new intimacies comes your way. And how does that feel for you if it does? What do you have around that in terms of values, in terms of how you welcome that in, how you embrace that experience in your life? Mars is another one that's on the move later on today, transiting into gate 12 at 2251. And this is the gate of standstill, of caution. It's an individual throat gate. Saturn is in the solar plexus, gate 22. So we have a channel for 8 days. We have this channel, this manifesting channel, the channel of openness, a design of a social being, one of 3 social channels in the body graph. And as I said, manifestor channels, there's a very powerful energy involved here where the individual can cautiously talk about their feelings when the timing is right. And right timing is key in this channel. It's a romantic acoustic channel. This is a channel that requires patience, solar plex channel. Or you have to be in the right mood to eat, to sleep, to sing, to shag, anything. Honor your moods, honor those moods. Wait before you act or before you speak. The more patient you are, the clearer your emotions and the more powerful your impact will be. The moon went into gate 42 at 9:43 this morning, so maybe an hour ago, maybe, as I'm recording and releasing this. It's the gate of growth. It's a sacral gate. There can be a strong pressure here to finish what has been started. It's part of that cycle of maturation. It has that energy to it. And the energy comes from the sacral to see the process through to completion. And if it was entered into correctly to begin with, then that ending for it will also be correct, and it can be finished off. The experience can go through the rest of the process of retreat and privacy and working, witnessing what's gone on in that experience and bringing it then eventually to the collective as something very valuable to share. And the moon is going into gate 3 next at 18:59. And this is difficulty at the beginning. Difficulty now, difficulty at the beginning. This is the gate of ordering. It's again a sacral gate, and it brings a channel with Pluto, because Pluto is hanging out in gate 60 at the moment. And this is the channel of mutation. So a format channel. It's a channel that is here to bring radical change into the world. but not constantly. It's consistently inconsistent. It's unpredictable. It works on a pulse energy, and it operates in its own individual timing. This is a format channel, as I say, so it brings its mutative pressure to change to every individual activation that you have. It's very, very powerful. And there could be some depression here. There could be some melancholy, perhaps. It's very hard to have these powerful energies, but not to have any control over the timing of them. And the final moon gate today is gate 27. This is the mirror to gate 59. So it's a sacral gate, 419 tomorrow morning. And this is the gate of nourishment, the gate of caring. This is the oxygen mask gate, where you take care of yourself first before you take care of anyone else, so that you don't overextend your caring nature, so you don't use up all your energy giving to things that may not be correct for you to give to. And you never give to the point that you've got nothing left for yourself. There can be a powerful instinct in this gate to protect and nourish the others in your community. It's a tribal activation, defense circuit, but through tribal. There can be compassion here in this gate of caring, compassion for those who need guidance, who need care and support. So yeah, sacral gate, defense circuit, mirror to the 59. I think that sums it all up for the for gate 27. And tomorrow we have a third line day, intimacy and sexuality in the line of trial and error and bonds made and broken. It's going to be interesting. So I will see you tomorrow for that. And until then, go gently.